So you want to be an undercover Brella main. I don't know why, but I respect the enthusiasm.
I've been maining the Undercover Brella since early Splatoon 2. Back then, I never paid attention to the meta or anything, so learning it was a bottom-tier weapon definitely threw me for a loop. I use it and get wins. How can it be bad? Turns out, tier lists the whole time were nothing but scams. Doesn't mean you can't use them, just that it takes more effort to see success with. And yeah, while it would be more consistent to play with something reliable like any of the dozens of shooters or even the dreaded pencil, I find it way more satisfying to kick their ass with something that takes true skill to win with, proving once and for all you're just superior in every single possible way, and that it is indeed a skill issue. Unless you lose, in which case you have the perfect excuse.
Whether it's for fun or you seriously want to take this competitively, I will be spending the next full length of this YouTube video to explain why I love this weapon so much. Hi, my name is Ryan, and this is the definitive guide on how to master the Undercover Brella. I'm so sorry.
Before we get started on how to best utilize it, it's best we break down what exactly this weapon does. The Undercover Brella is a rapid-firing shotgun with a shield, which is quite possibly the most metal description of a weapon I could ever give. To balance out how hilarious of a concept it is, they made its ammo and shield weak. Thankfully, you're very mobile, and the fire rate is fast enough to tolerate.
Given the nature of the weapon that I'm currently talking about, I'm going to stray away from being overly harsh on it, as I don't want this video to be too self-deprecative. Even then, I can only do so much.
A typical shot can deal up to 40 damage, and the shield has 200 health. This means that, against an enemy at full health, the weapon is a 3-shot if you're able to hit them dead on. This incentivizes you to mainly focus on enemies who are already weakened, unless you have some godlike aiming. The shield can deal damage when it touches an enemy, or even an object, but it would also mean taking damage as well, so it's not recommended. Besides, 2 shots and a shield poke only equate to 95 damage. What an actual meme.
So you're probably thinking, oh, it doesn't have a lot of damage, and the shield doesn't have a lot of health, so what am I supposed to do with this thing? And while that is a valid question, the weapon itself is not meant to be primarily used in a firefight. Yes, I realize that I just said that the gun is not meant to be used as a gun in the game where you play with guns.
The primary purpose of the main weapon is actually best used supportively. It's a really good painting tool, and how fast it's able to churn out shots definitely helps to cover a lot of ground. It can even help with painting walls if you know how to spend your shots optimally. The best use you can make out of this weapon is to just mark your territory so your team can get where they need to go without having to expend their own resources. In the situations where you are in the midst of a fight, your aim is not necessarily to win, but to just survive. And that's where the shield comes in.
Not only are you meant to play supportively, but the weapon also shines under a skirmish playstyle, aka moving around so much that the enemy can't hit you. This also becomes a lot easier with the recent buff to, jumping while shooting. Thanks, Nintendo. Very cool.
All this movement, plus your shield, which makes your opponent have to shoot for 3 bodies worth of damage in order to put you down, means you are going to stay alive a lot longer than you might think.
You see, playing Undercover is less about hitting that yonky sploinky, and instead, all about tilting the opponent so much that they rage quit on the spot. A good rule of thumb is, the more obnoxious you think you are, the better at your job you're probably doing. Just remember not to be too disrespectful. If the way people playing Tetraduelers has taught me anything, it's that dying for your team is not always a bad thing. Do not be afraid of the big sleep. In fact, embrace it. Utilize it as a part of your strategy. Just whatever you do, please do not look at the KD ratio. It's not that important anyway. I promise I was playing good. I was not carried!
Wow, With a playstyle like this, it looks like it could be pretty fun. It might be able to carve out a niche for itself if given the chance. What could possibly go...
Hey! What are your weaknesses?
So, yeah, as fun as this weapon is, there are a lot of things to keep in mind while piloting it. The shield is very useful for blocking a lot of damage, even if it exceeds the max HP. A literal nuke could go off, and as long as it counts as one hit and doesn't pierce, you'll live long enough to die from the radiation poisoning later. But it's important to remember that if they throw a bomb, or at least a substantial one, it'll collapse on impact. Losing your shield is obviously a bit of a problem, but you might want to sometimes run into a bomb to make it blow up early. Depends on the situation. Either way, if you just wait about 4 seconds, it should respawn. If it's just damaged a little, just stop shooting and let it recover automatically.
There is one way to get your shield back to full HP. And that's to get a kill. Alright, yeah, pretend I didn't say anything. Unfortunately, this ability to automatically pop bombs comes with a catch. Because of course it fucking does. If an enemy gets behind you and is smart enough to throw one, it'll explode from behind. It'll detonate where your hurt box is, leaving you with no protection. It doesn't happen that often, but it does incentivize you to not want to walk backwards while it's unfurled.
Hand me another bag of them chips!
At the risk of sounding obvious, it's worth pointing out that the shield only protects you from the front. So you gotta watch out for those blind spots, because if you get pincered, you die. Simple as. Then there's the nature of the Brella's firing. It functioning like a shotgun-like weapon means that multiple bullets are shot at once. So it's more likely you'll only get a few hits off of one shot, making its already low DPS even more inconsistent. Speaking of shots, your first shot, while holding down the trigger, won't have the shield up, meaning it can sometimes be more optimal to stand behind a wall or other cover, even if not paintable, and waste the shot just so you have some protection. Oh my god, it gets especially annoying when you are shooting just to keep the shield up, even if you aren't aiming at anything in particular, potentially wasting ink in the process. Thankfully, it's not an ink-hungry weapon, but it can still be pretty inconvenient sometimes.
Another thing to keep in mind is the interaction between different subs and specials. The Undercover actually has some okay object damage, but the shots come out so slow that it's not really worthwhile most of the time. You could run Object Shredder, but that only gives you 1 to 2 less hits needed to break stuff. Besides, if you're not running Stealth Jump on your Undercover Brella set, you'll scare away the hoes!
Also, keep in mind that if you want to enter an enemy's big bubbler, you can't be shooting because the Brella shield will slightly knock you back and then break. Like I said before, bombs can break your shield on contact, but you'll ideally want to keep a distance with the shield up, just so any splash damage doesn't hit you. Stationary subs, like Beacon and Sprinkler, can be taken care of in 2 hits. So getting rid of them should be pretty simple. Beacons especially are a high priority if you can get to them.
Now, specials can be tricky to interact with due to the intricate properties they all share. TLDR, if it's only 1 hit, you should be fine. Maybe.
Trizooka is iffy. Yes, it can block a shot, but it shoots 3. And even then, I'm pretty sure each shot counts as 3 hits. Overall, the shield is unreliable at protecting you from that, so it's better to look for cover. Similar thing with missiles. It can block 1, but you're on your own for the rest of them. It could be useful to put an ink mine there in order to paint back the territory the missiles take, but I'll talk more about the sub later. Also, Crab Tank. DPS is too high, and it takes 10 shots to break. And that's if you get close enough. Do not engage. Full-on counters that just straight up invalidate the shield include Zipcaster, Inkstorm, Booyah Bomb, Killer Whale, Ultra Stamp, Triple Ink Strike, Kraken, and of all things, Triple Splashdown, since the fists go off after the main explosion, making it a multi-hit.
God, this is what it must feel like going up against Rapid Strike Urshifu holding a Focus Sash. No, the other one. Fucking really?
There are some specials that we can work around, though. Ironically enough, Reefslider is one hit, making it the easiest to counter, to the surprise of no one. Same with the shot fired out of the ink vac, but the sucking beforehand is a straight up counter, so only be ready to act once it's fully charged. If you're lucky enough to get close to them, you could bump them with a shield though. That could be pretty funny. Inkjet is surprisingly tolerable. Yes, it shoots multiple shots, but they're slow to come out, so your shield can take one and have somewhat of an easy time getting out of dodge. Even if you try to fight back, their own skirmishing will make it harder for them to aim, making you a pretty decent distraction. Jumps are not that big of a deal either. Each take about 2 hits, but you should really only focus on them if it really matters. Otherwise, just paint over them right after they pop. Simple as.
Okay, that's a lot of downside. Oh, don't you worry! All this complaining was just about the main weapon! Here's the rest of its kit.
For the sake of this video, I'm going to primarily focus on the vanilla kit because 1, I have more experience with it, and 2, I don't know how comfortable I'd feel recommending / using a potentially ableist special, even if it is no longer a flashbang.
If you enjoy that kit, more power to you. But I'm not the person to explain what makes it good.
Okay, back to talking about good kits. Your sub is the ink mine. Remember when I said your goal is to be as annoying as possible? Well, it doesn't get more annoying than getting an unexpected bit of damage that, if you're weak enough, could actually grab a kill. Dealing 35 or 45 damage, depending on distance, is notable enough to help combo with your shots, turning you into a 2-hit kill instead of a 3-hit.
It's the little things.
There is no risk putting down a mine. It's like setting up destiny. It will go off at some point. There is no escape from it. Granted, you can only have 2 out at a time, but even if you put down a 3rd one, the one put down first will just go off, meaning it also has some light versatility as being used as a painting tool.
Emphasis on light.
Lastly, for 5 seconds, more with sub power up. It will indicate to you and your allies the location of any poor unfortunate soul that got too close and still lived. Since you suck at getting your own kills, this is the perfect way to assist your teammates who actually can, especially since the mine might have weakened them. And since it also inks the floor under them, it can hamper their movement for a second, making it even easier for said teammates to guarantee their doom. As a bonus, both the damage and or marking can also act as assist kills if a teammate gets them, helping to boost your KD, which, again, doesn't matter.
It's just an all-around versatile sub-weapon that seemingly has no downsides, and is easily the best aspect of this kit. Even here, I've only scratched the surface of what its capabilities could include, so feel free to experiment and have fun trolling your opponents as much as possible.
The best way to optimize the mine is to place it in areas that you know the enemy will eventually go for. Whether that be near the objective, often around mid, or by flanking routes. The moment you catch them off guard is the moment you leave them open for the kill. Or, in the best case scenario, get a surprise kill when they least expect it, giving your mine the most bang for your buck.
Take my word for it, getting a kill with Ink Mine is one of the funniest fucking things you can do in this game from a practical sense, and it never gets old. But is it common enough to want to spam it all over the map? Well... yeah, I think it's worth considering. All those clips, by the way, in the first year of this game's life. And there's probably more as well from that first year that I didn't use. If I'm going to be honest with you, I kind of consider myself more of an Ink Mine main than an Undercover main. It's just that, for better or for worse, Undercover offers so much synergy with my playstyle that I end up picking it over other Ink Mine weapons. The only real downside is that it takes up 60% of your ink tank, so my builds end up using some sub-saver in order to circumvent that issue. I can understand if you would rather have more room for other utility outside of the sub, but being the best thing about the weapon means that investing in it actually is more worthwhile than with other weapons. As is the ebb and flow of my relationship with Undercover Brella, we must now go from my personal favorite aspect of the weapon to its abject worst. Ladies and gentlemen, and all non-conforming, Reefslider.
I don't really think I need to go on a long diatribe on how bad this special is. It's Reefslider. You know what it does. It sucks. It's the most infamously bad special in the entire game, possibly the entire series. The worst part is that it actually does technically synergize with the kit, and I would probably hate it less if it didn't.
I will say that for what I primarily end up using my special for, it is better than the splashdown it had in 2. What an upgrade.
Because of the invincibility frames it gets while sliding, it could let you tank an entire Booyah Bomb or Ink Strike with no issue. In that regard, it's kinda badass, but that's all it's got going for it. That and being a big-ass hitbox. But if you're not careful, you'll end up like him.
Meow?
Overall, shit fucking sucks, and you should not invest in it at all. I mentioned that the playstyle of this weapon means that you're constantly dying, which means that your special gauge will be dropping all the time. But it's such ass that it barely ever matters. At least it's cheap, I guess. All that being said, it's time we actually start discussing how to best utilize Undercover in every single mode. Like, Turf War, you just do whatever. Do you really need me to explain to you how? This is the mode that Undercover was made for. Tower control is where the synergy of this weapon and all its collective jank comes to shine.
Turns out, playing a very defensive weapon is a very good idea when your game plan is to stay in a specialized spot for a prolonged period of time. Putting down mines on the path of the tower guarantee that it'll go off if the enemy team grabs a hold of it. Not only will certain teammates try to scout the path ahead, but those on the tower can set it off as well. And not only does it paint the floor where it was set, but it also paints the floor on the tower above and marks anyone on it.
Except Bluefin, I guess.
Again, very fucking obnoxious. Fun fact, did you know you could put a mine on the tower? The moment an enemy steps on it, it goes off, meaning they can't even take it without a little disruption. The only thing to be aware of in this regard is, and I can't believe I'm fucking saying this, but you need to watch the positioning of your right hand as well as your feet, because if that part of you is specifically over the grate or farther, you won't be able to place it down.
And yes, this has happened to me enough times for me to feel the need to be giving a warning about it.
It is very worthwhile to have it on the tower as much as possible though, because not only is it just more disruption, but while you're defending yourself and they ink the floor you're standing on, it repaints the floor for free and can act as a slight deterrent. Make sure to mine that tower any chance you get!
Bomb has been planted.
Even the pole on the tower has a lot of versatility, as it can help protect you from one of your blind spots. That being either side of you, depending on where you're standing. You could have it protect your backside, but it could also obstruct your view a bit, so it's very situational.
Splatoon players have always been infatuated with their poles, whether it's through irony or Stockholm Syndrome, but I don't see any love for the tower pole. This needs to change.
You can even aim the Reefslider towards the pole. It's a great deterrent to tell enemies to back off. Or to just kill them.
Wow, a kill. And with Reefslider, no less.
Its temporary invincibility is also a very useful clutch, especially at checkpoints in order to guarantee passing it. Just make sure they don't get you in the small window of vulnerability as you're arming it.
Simply put, your goal in this mode is to stay on the tower for as long as possible and piss off your opponents. Ideally, your teammates should be able to handle most of the fighting, either acting as distractions or supporting your defenses. This is the mode where Undercover truly shines and holds the most potential to succeed with.
Its next best mode is Splat Zones. Its painting capabilities make it pretty easy to capture zones, but there are some additional tech to keep in mind as well. Just like with the tower, putting mines in the zone is a no-brainer trap. They ink or walk over it, instant paint back. Even if they take back the zone completely without somehow detonating them, it'll go off the moment it's taken.
You would be surprised how often this happens.
Of course, you could always place mines in the same way that you would in any other mode, but this is your safest option as a great tool to either maintain or regain control. Ideally, you want to prioritize it, but don't treat it as a mandatory strategy. Also, make sure both mines are far away enough that they don't overlap with each other in order to get the most paint out of them. Only keep them close together if you want to attempt a combo with it, although it is very situational and requires reading. As for Reefslider, well, it's got that infamous cheese strategy, but that's it. At least you're probably behind some cover, so you won't immediately die from doing the strat, but I would only do it when it's absolutely necessary.
Very solid mode, and an easy starting point if you're trying to practice getting better with the weapon.
I wouldn't recommend bringing Undercover to Rainmaker unless you really know what you're doing. It's really bad at breaking the shield, the Rainmakers, not the Brella, taking 11 shots when uninterrupted.
10 with Object Shredder. But remember, don't!
So it's best to only attack it when helping someone else, or if literally no one else is there. At least the Undercover shield can help protect you from the explosion, letting you grab it quick to reset it if you need to. I would advise against this though, because it's an easy way to get yourself killed, and you want to make that somewhat of a challenge for them. Reefslider can help pop it, so at least it has some utility here. Under the right circumstances, it could also help get a kill on the Rainmaker holder, since they can be quite vulnerable with it. As for mines, again, just put them on flanking routes. Limiting the path that the Rainmaker can take and leaving them even more vulnerable than they already are is always nice. Funny enough, you can also put mines on the checkpoints as well. If you happen to take the Rainmaker there yourself, quickly placing a mine on top before it respawns can lead to an interesting trick if the enemy breaks it first, or you break it but they try to grab it before you can. Even funnier, them firing at the shield can sometimes aim at the floor, causing the mine to go off prematurely. Either way, extra damage is extra damage.
Ultimately, while running Undercover in this mode works, it could get a little technical, and I would only recommend it if you're familiar enough with the weapon or confident in your own skills in using it.
Man, I really don't like Clamblets, but I'll try to give advice where I can. I really wouldn't recommend this weapon for it anyway because, fun fact, did you know that popping Reefslider scatters all of your clams on the ground? Splashdown and 2 did the same thing. I can't escape this shit. I guess if you got a power clam and an ally, it could be a somewhat tolerable way to ensure it gets near the enemy basket. Otherwise, mines. Everywhere. Especially near your own basket.
There is not much else I can say here. Honestly, if you want to run a mine weapon in Clam Blitz, the Tentasorella Brella is way better suited for that mode, ironically enough. Then again, this whole video is meant to be talking about using an unoptimal weapon, so go for it, I guess, just don't say I didn't warn you.
Before talking about the gear, we should first focus on what weapons to look out for when choosing a team, and choosing which enemy to run away like a little bitch baby from. Let's start with who you'll be going up against. The shooter, slosher, dualies, and brush classes are actually pretty tolerable. Unless the player is cracked out of their mind, there isn't anything noteworthy to worry about. Rollers can be a bit tricky. Splat, Flingza, and even Dynamo can be a handful when your guard is down, especially if they're on the tower. Carbon is really only an issue when sharking, so nothing new there. Chargers aren't too bad for the most part as long as you have your shield up. Just always remember to respect the E-Leader 4K, lest you be punished for your sins. The sins of playing a fun weapon. Similar case with Splatlings. They aren't too bad to go up against, They just outrange, so the key is to get close. Good luck with that, though. Fighting a fellow Brella might feel like an uphill struggle, especially against a Tenta. But just focus on your positioning, and try to work around their own shield before they can get yours. The best counter to you is going to be blasters. Being able to hit you without having to go through your shield feels like cheating! Avoid as much as possible. While reflux can be okay to deal with, the tri-stringers can be a problem with their exploding arrowheads. Same logic as blasters, but they have even more range.
Fun!
If you find yourself up against one, good fucking luck. And finally, the Splatooners are surprisingly easy to deal with. The Stamper doesn't have too much mobility while attacking, and the Wiper doesn't do too much damage when at far enough of a distance. As long as you watch your spacing, you should be able to handle them pretty easily, and might actually get a kill if you're lucky enough.
Look alive, people! This is the sword counter you've been waiting for!
Also, keep in mind, this is my opinion given my personal experience against these players, so maybe they're just bad, I don't know. Maybe I'm just built different, I don't know. That's just my experience going up against these weapons, personally. As for teammates, of course you gotta have a cooler with you. The extra mobility cannot be understated. If you're not picking Sniper Rider for whatever reason, E-Leader can help overcompensate for your lack of power. Then, you could have one of your friends grab an Anki Nova or Rapid Blaster, and another one grab a Flingza or Inkbrush Nuvo, and have a full Inkmine team to drive the opposition clinically insane. In this comp, E-Leader could be swapped out for a Ballpoint Nuvo. And don't forget about those new dualies either. Of course, you're going to want teammates who are very kill-focused. Stuff like the Gals, Carbon Deco, N-Parry or Vanilla dualies, any good blaster, and the Splatanas all serve this function, just to name a few. It also helps to have teammates who can help or even take control of the battlefield. The best example I could give in this regard would be the Hydra Splatling, but like I said, E-Leader could also help out.
I know this team composition portion is pretty basic, but I would love to see what kind of wacky, experimental BS others can come up with. I really only want to explain what synergizes and give a few examples because, honestly, I'm still figuring this out myself. Don't be afraid to express your team and just have fun. I can't imagine anyone wanting to take this weapon and try hard it so much that they can't enjoy it. Besides, every team is different, so just pick whatever you think fits.
And now the moment you've been waiting for! The gear. Strive. Excuse me. Here is my current loadout. Quick super jump and ink resistance up for standard build stuff, as well as sub resistance up for that defensive playstyle. Come back and quick respawn because, you know, you're gonna die a lot, so you might as well make the most of it.
I could easily make a joke about the rest of your team running tenacity, but even then, you're probably just better off running special charge up.
Stealth jump to help us get back into the fight quickly and make the best use we can out of comeback. Now, Inksaver sub is important, as this much specifically turns a 60% sub into one that's just under 50. Finally, we have 2 subs of sub power up. This not only slightly increases the mine's marking and explosion radiuses, but it also makes the marking last an extra second longer.
Probably not the most optimized build, but it's the one I'm proud of.
As for other stuff you can experiment with, let's look at some clothes exclusive ones first. You can ignore opening Gambit, Last Ditch Effort, Tenacity, and Ability Doubler, I guess? These only give situational buffs, and the situations to trigger them are too specific, and the buffs aren't noteworthy enough to warrant it.
Hey, if you want to bank on the last 30 seconds of a match to make somewhat of a decent play with Last Ditch Effort, be my guest, but I'll stick with the actual reliable strategies. For my Undercover Brella comp.
The only exception to this is Comeback, as it, sadly, synergizes with its playstyle, and the buffs are worth it. I wouldn't recommend Ninja Squid. Unless you want to use it as a tool to get away easier, it's not that useful, and even then, it slows your swim speed, so is it really worth it? Haunt can have some interesting utility, but I would only recommend that, and to a lesser extent Thermal Ink, if you have really good communication with your team. I guess the mines could make Thermal Ink more tempting of an option, so feel free to slot it in if you're feeling brave enough. Don't touch Respawn Punisher with a 10-foot pole. You will not kill. It will only backfire. I've already spoken about Stealth Jump and Object Shredder, so all that's left is Drop Roller. While it could be interesting to experiment with, Stealth Jump is just so necessary on this kit that it just wouldn't be worth it. Unfortunate, but don't bother. Now for the universal buffs! Straight up, do not bother with anything that will boost your special, as investing in that is just wasting slots. So no special charge up, special saver, or special power up. Same thing with Intensify Action. With the way this weapon works, all that would do would increase the speed at which you squid surge and ease of squid rolling. Yeah, no thanks. As for some small utility, you're always going to want at least one sub of ink resistance up, sub resistance up, and quick super jump. Ink Saver sub and sub power up is mandatory on a mind focused kit, but if not, replacing those slots with mobility focused gear like run speed up and or swim speed up can go a long way. Run speed can be especially useful on non-tower control modes. Finally, Ink Saver main and or ink recovery up might look interesting, but I would only recommend it if you use a substantial amount, and even then, it probably would hamper the potential of your build more than anything. I just personally wouldn't recommend it.
Let me tell you, it feels really weird maining a weapon that the entire community constantly calls one of the worst in the game. There actually was a time where I was trying to find other weapons to focus on because I thought it would be foolish wasting my time on something that's so obviously bad. But you know what? When I gave it a second chance for it to show me what it's capable of, when I was failing to find anything in the game that I could see consistent success with, it was able to prove to me that no, I was able to prove to myself that that tier list doesn't matter. That despite everything going against it, I am at my best when I have my trusty Brella in hand. And I mean, the results don't lie. It's not even that I got carried. I actively helped to make those wins possible. I play my part so well, even the game acknowledges what I've achieved. If you take anything away from this video, even if you still have no interest in playing Undercover, well, I don't know why you're still here, but I appreciate it. Just remember, play what you want. Because if a weapon finds itself at the bottom of some arbitrary list, that doesn't mean it's bad, but instead just takes a little bit more effort. And wouldn't that be something to proudly boast about? Unless it's Reflux Deco. There is no saving that.